The story kicks off with the protagonist, a dedicated and meticulous student at Hanguk University, standing before his classmates for a crucial group presentation. His slides are a kaleidoscope of flashing, rainbow-colored text, an unusual choice that immediately draws snickers from his peers. A girl rolls her eyes, muttering under her breath, "What's with the title? And why is it all in rainbow font?" Her friend, a boy seated next to her, shakes his head in agreement. "Right? Don't you think the character in the background is even worse?" Despite their lack of enthusiasm, the protagonist presses on with unwavering determination. He dives into the topic, an analysis of the university's core values like honesty, creativity, and dedication, as he carefully outlines whether Hanguk University has been successfully instilling these values in its students, all while critiquing the reputations of its alumni. He even goes a step further, attempting to redefine those very ideals and discuss the role students should take on in their futures. However, while the protagonist presents with fervor, the room's attention wanes. As the presentation wraps up, the credits roll, revealing a shocking truth: the protagonist did everything, from research and data analysis to presentation design, all by himself. His group members are nowhere to be seen. They didn't contribute a single thing. In fact, their names are completely absent from the credits. Later, the protagonist finds himself face to face with his professor to discuss the project. "Were there any issues with my presentation?" the protagonist asks. "It was quite impressive, but did none of your other group members participate?" the professor asks. The protagonist explains with a straight face: "One person didn't send their research by the deadline, another missed class due to a family emergency, and the last never even showed up to any of our meetings." The professor listens, a hint of doubt crossing his face, but ultimately nods. "I see. Well, I will let it slide." The protagonist, feeling vindicated, brushes off any lingering doubts. But little does he know, his actions are far from over. As soon as the final grades are released, his phone begins to buzz non-stop with angry messages from his group members. "Did you really leave my name off the presentation? I told you about my great-aunt." One message reads. Another accuses him of lacking basic decency. "I guess you get an F in personality too. Hope you are satisfied." But the most concerning message is from Jae-young, a graduating senior, who writes, "I cannot graduate now, thanks to you. We need to talk." As the semester progresses, the protagonist reflects on his hectic schedule. He is juggling a part-time job on weekends and working toward his goal of developing a mobile game. He is busy, but he is determined to improve his programming skills in order to bring his game to life. But his focus on the game is soon interrupted by Soo-young Han, a classmate from the visual design department. She messages the protagonist, letting him know that she is backing out of their project because she has received a job offer. Soo-young tries to soften the blow by recommending a new collaborator, Jae-young Jang, a senior from visual design. "I have asked a really talented classmate to take over," she writes. The protagonist is intrigued but wary. The day of the meeting arrives. The protagonist arrives early, eager to meet his new collaborator, but Jae-young is nowhere to be seen. Time ticks by, and the protagonist grows increasingly frustrated. Is he late? Did he get the time wrong? Maybe he changed his mind? He thinks. He waits, giving Jae-young a few more minutes, but his patience begins to wear thin. "This is a waste of time," the protagonist mutters to himself. Finally, Jae-young arrives, unapologetically late but seemingly nonchalant about it. "Is this the place?" he asks, almost bored, not acknowledging the fact that he kept the protagonist waiting. The protagonist cannot help but fume internally. Just, oh. He's this late, and he just says oh. His frustration bubbles up, but he hides it behind a calm exterior. "You're the designer, right?" he asks through clenched teeth, determined to make this project work, despite the rocky start. The scene opens with the arrival of Jae-young, the new visual designer assigned to take over from Soo-young on protagonist mobile game project. Soo-young had backed out at the last minute, her excitement over a new job offer outweighing her commitment to the team. Despite the unexpected change, she had recommended Jae-young as a replacement, offering protagonist a glimmer of hope that the transition might be smooth. But when Jae-young walked into the meeting, that hope quickly faded. Jae-young arrived 40 minutes late, strolling into the room with an air of nonchalance, his hoodie loosely hanging around his shoulders. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the time wasted. His eyes barely met protagonist as he casually dropped his bag onto the table, as if time did not matter to him, and as if protagonist time certainly did not. This, of course, set off a chain reaction of irritation for protagonist, who already struggled with the unreliability of his previous team members. When Jae-young finally took a look at the design Soo-young had put together, his assessment was anything but encouraging. "Boring," he muttered, flipping through the sketches with barely a glance. His critique was sharp, dismissive, he called the designs half-hearted, and that cut deep. Protagonist patience was already wearing thin from past experiences with people who could not be relied on. Jae-young's blatant disregard for the work that had been done was like a spark to dry tinder. Protagonist, despite the growing frustration bubbling inside him, did his best to remain professional. He explained the concept of the game, a 2D action game for kids, built on the Coco's 2D framework, hoping to give Jae-young some context to better understand the design vision. But Jae-young barely seemed to register the information, his eyes glazed over as if he was mentally somewhere else entirely. This indifference only made protagonist more anxious. Had he made the wrong choice? Was Jae-young really the right fit for the project? But then, something shifted. Jae-young seemed to snap to attention when protagonist probed a little further about his experience. He shrugged off the idea that he was only a designer and dropped a bombshell. He had web development experience, which, at first, protagonist doubted. But Jae-young was not one to be easily dismissed. He pulled up his portfolio, showing off designs that were nothing short of impressive. Protagonist was taken aback by the sheer quality of Jae-young's work. There was a clear and undeniable skill in the way Jae-young approached game art, his designs carrying a vibrant energy that immediately captured protagonist's attention. The doubts that had clouded protagonist's judgment began to dissipate, replaced by a reluctant admiration. Jae-young, despite his earlier rude behavior, was proving himself to be talented, perhaps more talented than anyone else he had worked with. Jae-young even took it a step further, sketching something on the spot, a design for a character that had protagonist's jaw nearly dropping. It was exactly the kind of creative flair the project needed. Jae-young had not only made a lasting impression, but he had also started to earn protagonist's trust. But there was still the matter of Jae-young's character, the laid-back attitude, the tardiness, the lack of professionalism that lingered like a cloud. Jae-young, however, was quick to reassure protagonist. He claimed he was reliable, his laid-back attitude simply a reflection of his personality, not his commitment. He confirmed that his graduation had been delayed, meaning he would be available for the entire semester to work on the project. This was the one piece of news that finally put protagonist's mind at ease, albeit only slightly. He reluctantly agreed to work with Jae-young, hoping that the potential for great work would outweigh the inconvenience of his attitude. But then, the moment that changed everything. As protagonist handed over his phone to Jae-young to exchange numbers, Jae-young's eyes narrowed, his fingers pausing mid-type as he glanced at the screen. There was a strange tension in the air, and Jae-young's smirk grew as he met protagonist's gaze. "You have already got my number," he said coolly. Protagonist froze. Confused, he snatched his phone back, flipping through his contacts. That is when his blood ran cold. Jae-young was saved in his phone as Free Rider 3. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Jae-young was that guy, the one from his previous group project who had done nothing while accusing protagonist of unfairly excluding him from the final presentation. The same person who had caused a scene Free Rider 3. The name was a cruel reminder of the drama and frustration Sangwoo had faced, the last thing he ever expected to encounter again in his new project. Protagonist's heart skipped a beat as he stared at Jae-young, now fully aware of the history between them. Jae-young's smug expression only added salt to the wound. Protagonist, unable to hide his shock, was now trapped. He had no choice but to work with Jae-young, this brilliant but toxic individual. The irony of it all was almost too much to bear. As if on cue, Jae-young gave him a mocking look, one that seemed to say, "You are stuck with me now." Protagonist, rattled and unsure how to handle the situation, left the room in a daze. The scene ended with Protagonist running into Jae-young once again at school, his steps heavy with the weight of the confrontation. Jae-young did not say a word, but that look, smug, knowing, lingered in Protagonist's mind like a threat.